The human shared his sleeping bag with an alien girl. What she did after shocked all. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Jason Carter had spent the past few weeks on the remote planet of Zorath IV, a place far from the comforts of Earth. A skilled engineer, he had been assigned to assist in the construction of a new research facility on the harsh, frozen landscape. The planet's weather was unforgiving, with temperatures often plummeting well below freezing, and the constant snowstorms were a constant challenge. But despite the cold, Jason found solace in the work, and it gave him a sense of purpose. That was, until he met her. Lyra was an alien from a distant star system, a species that had recently made contact with humanity. She had striking green skin and eyes that shimmered like stars. Her long silver hair flowed in the wind, and she moved with a grace that left Jason in awe. They had met just a few days earlier when she had been assigned to help with the facility's operations. Lyra was quiet and reserved, often keeping to herself, but Jason couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her than met the eye. That night, the temperature had dropped to an unbearable level. Jason was in the camp's main shelter, huddled close to a small fire, when he heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find Lyra standing in the snow, shivering from the cold. I don't have anywhere to sleep," she said softly, her voice trembling. Jason's heart went out to her. Despite the harsh conditions, he couldn't bear the thought of leaving her out in the cold. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to let her in. She hesitated, glancing at the warmth of the fire before stepping inside. Jason grabbed an extra sleeping bag from the corner of the room and spread it out on the floor. "It's not much, but it'll keep you warm," he said with a small smile. Lyra nodded gratefully and sat down, her silver hair shining in the firelight. She was still cold, though, and her breath came in short bursts. Jason sat beside her, not sure what to say. He wasn't used to interacting with aliens, but there was something about Lyra that made him want to connect. They didn't speak much at first, just the occasional word here and there. The warmth of the fire and the comfort of the sleeping bag made it easier for them to relax. But as the night wore on, something shifted. Jason noticed the way Lyra's body began to relax, the tension leaving her shoulders. It was as if she had been holding her breath since the moment they met. Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of pride that he was the one to offer her comfort. It wasn't much, but it was enough. And then, as he lay there beside her, his mind began to wander. The soft glow of the firelight illuminated Lyra's face, and he found himself captivated by her beauty. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, and he couldn't help but feel a strong pull towards her. He knew it was probably foolish to be thinking like this, especially since they were from two completely different species. But the warmth of the moment, combined with the closeness between them, made it hard to ignore. Suddenly, Lyra turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason felt a lump form in his throat. He smiled softly, unsure of what to say in response. "You don't have to thank me," he said, his voice low. "It's just what anyone would do." But deep down, Jason knew that his feelings for her were anything but ordinary. He didn't know what the future would hold, or if anything would come of this connection, but for now, in that moment, he was content just to be with her. Little did he know, Lyra was feeling the same way. As she looked at him, something stirred within her. She had never known kindness like this before, not from her own people, and certainly not from a human. She didn't know what it was, but there was something about him that made her feel safe, something that made her want to stay close. What happened next would shock both of them. As the fire crackled softly in the background, Lyra did something Jason never expected. Without a word, she moved closer, her body pressing against his. Jason tensed, unsure of what was happening, but Lyra looked at him with an expression of both uncertainty and longing. And just like that, they shared a moment of connection that neither of them could have predicted. It wasn't about attraction or desire, but about something deeper, something that transcended the differences between their species. And in that moment, Jason realized that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change both their lives forever. As the night grew colder and the wind howled outside, Jason and Lyra lay together in the warmth of the small shelter. The fire in the corner crackled softly, its flickering light casting gentle shadows on the walls. They had both been exhausted from the harsh conditions, but there was something about the moment that made the world outside seem distant, irrelevant. Lyra had moved closer to Jason, her body resting lightly against his, and he could feel the warmth of her presence, soothing and unfamiliar. For a brief moment, the only sound in the room was the rhythm of their breathing. Jason couldn't help but notice the way her green skin seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and how her silver hair shimmered like stardust. There was something ethereal about her, something he couldn't quite place, but it captivated him. He tried to keep his thoughts in check, telling himself it was just the exhaustion, the cold, and the strange, shared circumstances that brought them so close together. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. As Lyra shifted slightly, Jason found himself lost in the depth of her golden eyes. They were so unlike any eyes he'd ever seen before, filled with a kind of wisdom and mystery that made his heart race. She was an alien, from a distant world, and yet in that moment, they were not so different. She was as human as anyone he'd ever known, and the way she had responded to his kindness earlier made him feel like he had connected with her in a way he never expected. Lyra could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken words that hung between them. She knew Jason was a man of honor, of kindness, and that he had treated her not like a strange being, but like a person. That was rare, even in her own world. Her species was known for its cold, calculating nature, and the idea of someone showing genuine compassion, without expecting anything in return, was almost unheard of. But Jason had done just that. She had come to him for warmth, for protection from the cold, and he had offered it without hesitation. And now, as they lay side by side, she found herself grappling with emotions she had never felt before. Lyra wasn't sure what to make of it. She had been raised to believe that emotions were a weakness, something to be controlled and hidden away. But with Jason, she felt something stir inside her, something deep and undeniable. As she looked at him, her heart fluttered. She wasn't sure if it was the warmth of the moment, or if it was something more profound, but she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. And in that moment, she made a decision. Lyra shifted slightly again, this time facing Jason, her breath warm against his skin. She looked up at him with a soft, almost shy smile, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and longing. "Jason," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "thank you for everything." Her words were simple, but the emotion behind them was real. Jason turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. There was no need for further words. The connection they shared in that instant was enough. As their eyes locked, Jason felt his heart beat faster, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He didn't know what would come of this, or if this was simply a fleeting moment of comfort in a world that felt so distant. But in that moment, with Lyra so close to him, he couldn't help but feel that something profound was happening between them. The silence stretched on for a few more seconds before Jason finally spoke, his voice low and soft. "You don't have to thank me, Lyra," he said gently. "I'd do it again, without a second thought." Lyra smiled again, this time a little more confidently. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." It was then that Jason realized that their bond, this strange connection between a human and an alien, was something that neither of them had expected. And yet, as they lay together in the warmth of the shelter, it was undeniable. In the vastness of the universe, they had found something special, something rare, something that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. And though the future was uncertain, Jason knew one thing for sure. This moment, this connection, would change everything. The days that followed were filled with an unspoken understanding between Jason and Lyra. As they continued their work on Zorath IV, the bond between them only seemed to grow stronger. Jason found himself looking forward to their moments together, even if they were brief. There was something about Lyra that he couldn't quite explain. She was different from anyone he had ever known, her calm demeanor, her grace, her intelligence. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, he could see a vulnerability, a quiet longing that mirrored his own. One evening, After another long day of work, Jason found himself sitting by the fire again, this time alone. The camp was unusually quiet, the usual chatter of the crew replaced by the sounds of the storm raging outside. He sat, staring into the flames, his mind wandering to Lyra. Just as he was lost in thought, the familiar sound of footsteps broke through the stillness. He looked up to see Lyra standing there, her green skin glowing faintly in the dim light. She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure of how to proceed. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty. Jason smiled and gestured to the spot next to him. "Of course," he said, his voice warm. Lyra sat down beside him, the space between them filled with a comfortable silence. They both gazed into the fire, the crackling flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The storm outside seemed to make the world feel even more distant, as if they were the only two people left on the planet. Finally, Lyra broke the silence. "Jason," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to explain it, but being here, with you, feels different." Jason turned his head to look at her, his heart skipping a beat at the vulnerability in her eyes. "Different how?" he asked gently, his voice filled with curiosity. Lyra paused, as if searching for the right words. "I've spent my entire life being told to control my emotions, to keep them hidden. But when I'm with you, I feel like I can let go, like I don't have to hide anymore." Her words struck Jason deeply. He had always believed that emotions were something to be shared, not hidden away. But hearing Lyra speak about her struggle made him realize just how much she had been holding inside. "You don't have to hide with me, Lyra," he said softly, his voice reassuring. "You can be yourself." Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes searching his face for sincerity. "I don't know if I can ever fully understand what it's like to be human, but with you, I feel like I'm starting to understand what it means to care," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Jason's heart swelled at her words. He had always admired Lyra's strength, her ability to endure in such harsh conditions. But now, seeing this side of her, the side that longed for connection, for understanding, made him feel even closer to her. He reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. "I care about you too, Lyra," he said, his voice steady and sincere. The touch of his hand sent a spark through both of them. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them processing the weight of their words. Jason could feel the tension between them, the unspoken feelings that had been building for days. He didn't know where this connection would lead, or if it was even something that could last beyond the harsh conditions of Zorath IV. But in that moment, with Lyra's hand in his, he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want to let go. As the fire crackled and the storm continued to rage outside, Jason and Lyra shared a quiet moment, the world around them fading away as they sat together, two beings from different worlds, finding something rare and beautiful in each other. The days on Zorath IV continued to pass in a quiet rhythm, each one blending into the next. Jason and Lyra worked side by side, building the research facility, braving the planet's harsh conditions, and sharing moments of silence, where words were unnecessary. The bond between them had grown, but neither spoke of it aloud. There was a comfort in their silence, in the way they understood each other without needing to explain. It was as if the cold, endless landscape outside the shelter had made them both realize how precious the warmth of human connection could be. One evening, after another long day, Jason and Lyra found themselves back in the shelter. The storm had been particularly fierce that day, and the wind howled against the walls, threatening to tear everything apart. Yet inside, the warmth of the fire and the quiet presence of each other felt like a sanctuary. They sat by the fire, their gazes occasionally meeting, both unsure of how to express the growing feelings between them. Jason stared into the flames, the light flickering in his eyes, while Lyra watched him from the corner of her eye. The tension was subtle, but it was there, like an unspoken promise hanging in the air. Finally, Lyra spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Jason," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Do you ever think about what happens after all of this? After the work is done, after we leave this planet?" Her question caught him off guard. He hadn't allowed himself to think about the future, not yet. They were both there for a job, for the mission, but Lyra's question made him realize just how temporary their lives had become. It was easier to focus on the now, on the tasks at hand, than to think about what would come when the mission ended. But as he looked at her, as he saw the vulnerability in her eyes, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he had been avoiding the very thing that he needed to face. I don't know, Jason replied honestly, his voice quiet. I try not to think too much about it. I just take things one day at a time. But I suppose I've never really thought about what happens next. Lyra nodded, a sad smile playing at the corners of her lips. I suppose that's how we survive, isn't it? She said softly. By focusing on the now, because the future is uncertain. But it's hard, sometimes, to ignore the things we feel, the things we want, and just keep going. Her words hung in the air, and Jason could feel the weight of them pressing down on him. He didn't know how to respond. The truth was, he felt the same way. There was something between them, something he couldn't ignore, but the uncertainty of the future made it difficult to act on it. He had never been good at expressing his feelings, especially when he wasn't sure of the other person's emotions. He had learned long ago to protect himself, to keep his distance, to not let anyone in too close. But with Lyra, it was different. He had never felt this kind of connection before, and it scared him. Lyra, Jason said, his voice gentle, I don't know what the future holds. I don't even know what tomorrow will look like. But I do know that I don't want to lose what we have right now. Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. Neither do I, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment stretched on, the air thick with the weight of their unspoken feelings. Jason wasn't sure what to do next, but he knew one thing for sure. He didn't want this moment to end. He didn't want to let go of the connection that had formed between them, no matter how uncertain the future might be. As they sat there, side by side, in the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the storm, they both knew that their journey was far from over. There would be challenges, obstacles, and moments of doubt, but for now, they had each other. And that was enough. The days continued to blur together as Jason and Lyra settled into a routine on Zorath IV. The planet's harsh conditions were always present, but with each passing day, they became more accustomed to the cold winds and the relentless snow. They worked side by side, building and maintaining the research facility, but there was something else growing between them, something unspoken but undeniable. They didn't need words to understand the growing connection. It was in the way Jason looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, in the way Lyra would find excuses to stay close to him. It was subtle, but the bond was there, and neither of them could deny it. One evening, as they sat by the fire after another long day of work, Jason found himself watching Lyra more than usual. The firelight flickered across her face, casting shadows that made her green skin appear almost otherworldly. Her silver hair glimmered as she brushed it back from her face, and Jason's chest tightened as he realized just how deeply he had come to care for her. She caught him staring and raised an eyebrow, a playful smile tugging at the corner of her lips. What? She asked, her voice soft but teasing. Jason blinked, surprised that she had noticed. Nothing, he said quickly, looking away, though his heart was still pounding. I was just thinking. Lyra tilted her head, her golden eyes studying him closely. About what? Jason hesitated, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. It wasn't something he was used to doing, but with Lyra, it felt different. I don't know, he finally admitted. I've never been this close to anyone before. Not like this. Lyra's expression softened. She could feel the weight of his words, the sincerity in his voice. I know what you mean, she said quietly. It's strange, isn't it? How we can be so different, and yet, here we are. Jason nodded, his gaze returning to the fire. Yeah, I never expected any of this. I thought I was just here to do a job, to help with the research. But then, his voice trailed off, and Lyra reached out, placing her hand gently on his. The simple touch sent a wave of warmth through him, and he looked at her, his heart racing. But then, Lyra repeated, her voice soft. But then, I met you. Jason finished, his words hanging in the air between them. There was a long silence as they both processed what had been said. Lyra's heart beat faster in her chest. She had known for some time that something had changed between them, but hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. She had tried to ignore it, to tell herself that it was just the isolation of the planet, that it was just the stress of their work, but deep down, she knew it was more than that. I don't want this to end, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason turned to her, his heart pounding in his chest. It doesn't have to, he replied. The words felt right, and in that moment, they both knew they had crossed a threshold. Whatever had started between them was no longer just about survival or convenience. It was something deeper, something that neither of them could ignore. They didn't know what the future held, but for now, they had each other. As they sat there, side by side, in the warmth of the fire, neither of them could deny the connection that had formed between them. It was something neither of them had expected, but it was something they both needed. The storm outside raged on, but inside the small shelter, they found a peace they had never known before. The future was uncertain, and the world around them was harsh and unforgiving, but in that moment, it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they had found something rare, something beautiful, in each other. The days continued to pass, and the connection between Jason and Lyra grew stronger. They spent more time together, both in and out of the shelter. Each day, they faced the challenges of Zorath IV together, the harsh winds, the freezing temperatures, and the endless snowstorms that threatened to overwhelm them. But they found strength in each other, and that strength allowed them to push through. Lyra had become more than just a colleague to Jason. She was a partner, someone he could rely on in a way he had never experienced before. He found himself looking at her not just with admiration, but with a deep sense of affection that grew stronger with each passing day. It wasn't just about surviving the planet's brutal conditions anymore. It was about something deeper, something real. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the crackling flames casting a soft glow on their faces, Jason found himself watching Lyra with a mixture of awe and curiosity. She had become a mystery to him, one he was eager to explore, yet reluctant to fully understand. Her strength, her grace, and the way she held herself despite everything. There was something about her that captivated him. Lyra, for her part, had felt the shift between them as well. She had never expected to form such a bond with a human. Her people valued independence and self-sufficiency, and she had been raised to believe that emotions were a weakness. But with Jason, everything was different. He saw her not as an alien, but as someone capable of compassion, someone worth caring for. And that scared her. She had never allowed herself to get close to anyone, never allowed herself to rely on anyone, until Jason. And yet, with him, she felt safe. She felt understood. Jason, she said softly, breaking the silence. Do you ever wonder if we're just fooling ourselves? That maybe none of this is real? Jason turned to her, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. What do you mean? He asked, his voice soft and searching. Lyra hesitated, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. I mean, all of this. Us here together. It feels too good to be true. Like we're living in a dream that's bound to end. Jason thought about her words for a moment. He had always known that their situation was temporary. Zorath IV wasn't their home, and eventually, they would have to leave. But the idea that what they had could just be a fleeting moment, something that would disappear when the mission was over, felt like a punch to the gut. I don't know, Jason admitted. Maybe we are fooling ourselves. But I'd rather live in this moment, with you, than worry about what might happen tomorrow. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. She reached out, her hand brushing against his. You're right, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I don't want to think about the future either. I just want to be here, with you, for as long as we can. Jason took her hand in his heart swelling with emotion. He wasn't sure what the future held for them, but in that moment, it didn't matter. They were together, and that was enough. As the fire crackled in the background and the storm raged outside, Jason and Lyra sat in the warmth of each other's company. The world beyond the shelter seemed so distant, so irrelevant. All that mattered was the connection they had found, and in that moment, they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The days on Zorath IV continued to pass, and Jason and Lyra found a rhythm in their daily routines. The work at the facility was relentless, but they managed to find time for themselves, away from the constant demands of the planet. Every night, after the work was done and the storm raged outside, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories, laughter, and moments of quiet companionship. Despite the harsh conditions, there was a sense of peace in those moments, a sense that they were no longer alone in the vastness of space. One evening, as they sat together, Jason found himself reflecting on the days that had led them here. The bond between him and Lyra had deepened, and he knew it was no longer just about surviving the planet's conditions. It was about something far more meaningful. He had never imagined he would be here, on this distant world, with someone like her, someone so different from him, yet so incredibly similar. Lyra, for her part, was beginning to feel the same way. She had never expected to form such a connection with a human. Her people, the Zorath, valued strength and independence above all else, and emotions were often seen as weaknesses. But Jason had shown her a different side of life, one where kindness, empathy, and connection were worth more than any physical strength. As she looked at him now, with the firelight casting a warm glow on his features, she realized just how much he had come to mean to her. "Jason," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence, "do you ever think about what happens after this?" Jason turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice quiet. Lyra hesitated, her golden eyes searching his face for the right words. "I mean, after we leave this place. After the work is done, and we go our separate ways. What happens then?" Jason's heart sank at the thought. He had never allowed himself to think about the future, not really. The mission had always been his focus, getting the facility up and running, doing his part for humanity. But now, with Lyra by his side, the thought of parting ways seemed unimaginable. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice heavy. "I guess I never really thought about it. But now that you mention it," he trailed off, unsure of what to say. Lyra nodded, her gaze shifting back to the fire. "I guess I've been thinking about it too," she said quietly. "I don't want this to end, Jason. I don't want to go back to the way things were before I met you." Her words hung in the air between them, and Jason felt his heart skip a beat. He had never heard Lyra speak so openly about her feelings. It was both a relief and a weight, knowing that she felt the same way. He reached out, his hand finding hers in the dim light. "I don't want it to end either," he said softly, squeezing her hand gently. Lyra turned to face him, her eyes wide with sincerity. "But what does that mean, Jason?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What does it mean for us, after all of this?" Jason took a deep breath, his mind racing. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, he realized that it didn't matter. What mattered was now, what they had right here, right now. "It means we take it one day at a time," he said, his voice steady. "We don't know what the future holds, but we have this moment. And that's enough." Lyra smiled, a soft, genuine smile that made Jason's heart swell. She squeezed his hand in return. "I think I'm okay with that," she said, her voice calm. Jason smiled back, feeling a sense of peace settle over him. The storm outside raged on, but inside the shelter, everything felt right. He didn't know what the future held, but for now, he was content. He was with Lyra, and that was all that mattered. As the days passed on Zorath IV, Jason and Lyra found themselves settling into a comfortable routine. The work at the research facility was hard and demanding, but they had each other to lean on, and that made all the difference. They had built a bond that transcended the harsh conditions of the planet, a bond that was growing stronger with each passing day. Yet, despite the warmth they had found in each other's company, the reality of their situation was always lurking in the background. They were on a planet far from Earth, with a mission that would eventually come to an end. The thought of what would happen when the mission was over lingered in Jason's mind, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on the present, on the moments they shared. One evening, as the wind howled outside and the snow piled high against the shelter, Jason found himself staring at the fire, lost in thought. Lyra was beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. She had been unusually quiet that evening, and Jason couldn't help but notice the change in her demeanor. She was staring into the fire, her golden eyes distant, as if lost in thought. "Lyra," Jason said gently, breaking the silence. She looked up at him, her expression soft but uncertain. "Is something on your mind?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice low. "I've been thinking a lot lately," she said. "About what comes next. About what happens when this mission ends." Jason's heart skipped a beat at her words. He had been trying to avoid thinking about the end, but hearing her bring it up made it all too real. "I've thought about it too," he admitted. "I don't know what will happen when we leave this place, but I don't want to think about it too much right now. I just want to be here, with you." Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes searching his face. Do you think we can go back to our separate lives after this? Like nothing ever happened? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. Jason didn't have an answer. He didn't know if they could just go back to their old lives after everything they had shared. He didn't know if it would be possible to just walk away from the connection they had built, from the warmth and comfort they had found in each other. But in that moment, he knew that he didn't want to let go. I don't know, he said honestly. But I don't think we should worry about that right now. Let's just take things one day at a time and see where it leads. Lyra nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I think that's a good idea, she said softly. Jason reached out, taking her hand in his. They sat in silence for a while, the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the storm outside wrapping around them. It was a peaceful moment, and for the first time in a long time, Jason felt like everything was right. They didn't have to have all the answers, and they didn't have to know what the future held. They just had to be present, with each other, and that was enough. As the night wore on, Jason and Lyra sat together, content in the quiet comfort of their shared presence. They didn't talk about the future or what might come after the mission. Instead, they just enjoyed the moment, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the shelter, they had found a peace that was theirs alone. As the weeks passed, Jason and Lyra's bond grew even deeper. The harsh conditions of Zorath IV continued to challenge them, but they found comfort in each other. They no longer saw the planet's storms as a threat, but as something they could face together. Each day was a mix of work, quiet moments by the fire, and an unspoken understanding between them that no words were necessary. Their connection, though still new, was strong, and neither of them could ignore the pull they felt toward one another. One evening, after a long day of repairs at the facility, they sat together once again by the fire. The snowstorm outside raged as it had so many times before, but inside the shelter, there was a peaceful stillness. Lyra looked over at Jason, her golden eyes reflecting the firelight. He was gazing into the flames, his thoughts seemingly far away. It was moments like this, quiet and shared, that made her feel the weight of their time together. Jason, she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. He turned to her, offering a small smile. What is it? He asked, his voice warm and inviting. Lyra hesitated, her thoughts swirling. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had met under different circumstances? If we weren't here, on this planet, stuck in this situation, she asked, her tone filled with curiosity. Jason thought for a moment before answering, his gaze thoughtful. I suppose I do sometimes, he admitted. But I think we would have found each other anyway, even if it was in a different place, a different time. There's something about the way we connect, it feels like it was meant to happen. Lyra's heart fluttered at his words. She had always believed that connections like the one they shared were rare, but hearing him say it made her feel a sense of comfort, a sense of belonging she had never felt before. I agree, she said softly. Even though we come from such different worlds, it feels like we understand each other in a way no one else could. Jason nodded, the firelight dancing in his eyes. It's strange, isn't it? He said. How? Despite all the differences between us, there's a part of us that just fits. Lyra smiled, a soft, genuine smile. Yes, it's strange, but I wouldn't have it any other way. The air between them shifted, and for a moment, they simply sat in silence, their thoughts aligned in a shared understanding. The world outside could be cold, harsh, and unforgiving, but in that small shelter, with the fire crackling softly and the storm howling in the distance, everything felt right. Jason looked at Lyra, his heart full. I don't know what the future holds, Lyra, he said, his voice steady. But whatever happens, I'm glad we found each other. Lyra turned to him, her golden eyes filled with warmth and understanding. Me too, Jason. Me too. They sat together in the quiet, content in each other's presence. They didn't need to know what the future held, and they didn't need to worry about the unknown. All that mattered was the here and now, the moments they shared and the bond they had formed. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the shelter, the warmth between them was all that mattered. They were no longer just surviving the harsh world around them. They were living together, and that was enough.